Hey everybody, Pops Customs. I wanted to show you, I've had a few questions. Alright, so these are the rear links underneath the back, top, bottom. Okay, these are getting replaced. The nuts face the center, and when you do these, you lift from where these are hooked to the tow hook there. See if that shows up there in your video. Okay, if you lift from the tow hook, that's going to lift the body. When you lift the body, that will in turn relieve the tension on these, and so you'll set the body kind of back down as you put the shorter ones. When you set it down, the bottom of the link would go down to about the top of the leaf right there. When you do that and you swing it back, it's going to be pretty close to lined up. Make sure that you get some good grease on these bolts or some lubricant. Push them through, nuts on the inside, washers on the inside. Now I've had some questions about alignment, so let's go from here and move forward to the alignment. These are the carabiners that I use. These are like Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware. It's just a little S-clip, and so it's spring loaded on both sides. I just buy a roll of construction line. I like the yellow because it makes it more visible. The sun's out, shining bright, so it's kind of hard to see if you get just a regular string, right? So these are a little thicker, a little stronger. You can pull some tension on it. And so what I'm doing from the back axle, it's wider than the front by approximately 2 inches, which is why everybody uses those spacers on some of the other cars. So I pass that forward. And so what I'm effectively doing, I'm gonna try to zoom in here and see if I can get this concept to you, okay? So my trailer is where I do this work. I have marks that kind of identify about the width of the back. And so that gives me an indication when I pull 2 strings that when I do that, that transfers that straight line forward. So obviously center your steering wheel. That's important. You don't want your steering wheel crooked, right? So you go up in there, you sit in the car, maybe it's on the garage floor, whatever. Center your steering wheel, sit in it, look over the dash, see where you're at, right? Look over your screen, look over your speedometer, look down your steering column, get it where you want it, okay? And then match your marks. And so what you'll do here, I use a little clippy. I bought some fancy ones. I'll put a couple of them up here so you can kind of see what's going on. And so this string, effectively, when you move it back and forth, if you can see that, let me try to zoom for you. That back tire will deflect the string. Once you get past the tire and you pull, 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 and then boom, right when it hits just right, it'll go from a straight string and it'll start making a bend, right? See how that works? We don't want that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use that back tire to identify forward. Now, some people use a bar. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. Lasers, whatever. Guys, I'm simple. The string works just fine, right? So you make adjustments after you pull the string tight. Maybe a jack stand, you drape it over a jack stand, hook it with a big spring clamp, or you just squeeze it, right? So it puts a little tension on it. This is kind of your guide. It's going to change by probably, I would say maybe 4, 5, 6 turns, all right? So you pull that straight, you get that set, choose whatever style of clippy that you want if you're doing it like on a trailer. This is an angle iron, and so what I'll do, I'm trying to do this with 2 hands only and record, so yeah, it's not working out so well, but hey, here we are, right? So let's just kind of mock it. So you put the string, right, and you slide the clippy on, it's nice and tight. Let's just assume that we have it right, okay? So you'll measure, let me grab a tape, show you. So we have a back and a front of the tire. And so what you'll do, you'll center your steering wheel. Now, little trick I found over time is I have a tape measure that's gonna read inches on one side, metric on another. I'm trying to get you in the video there, okay? I like that because I'm not exactly as young as I used to be. I can look at this, I can read those hash marks a bit easier from a farther distance from on the other side of the beginning of the trailer, right? And so I can read that and I can use those marks. Now you can use the inch marks, you use whatever you want, use a ruler, use a yardstick, doesn't matter, right? But go to the farthest point out of the tire, right? And then get you a good accurate measurement here, and then again here on the front. Match to them. If anything, maybe pull the cart down a bit, because these are going to be lighter, right? These new ones that get replaced up here, they're going to be a bit lighter. That is going to change this angle right here. Okay, that's your tie rod. That's where you're going to do your alignment. So there's your lock. You're going to break that loose. That's typically an 18. You're going to hold this one while you do it. That's an 18 as well. Once you get this lock nut broke free, spin it back 3/4 threads, and then this right here you're going to hold, and that wants to stay parallel right there. See that? This is your steering knuckle. This is your tie rod. And what you want to do is you want to make sure this thing isn't twisted. When you go to put it back, you don't want this side to have a huge gap and then the back side to be pinched really tight and it's sitting at an odd angle. So you'll just make a small adjustment. Now, when you adjust these, what I found is that ideally, to get your settings, you're going to take this, you're going to break it loose, you're going to hold that. Once that's done, this doesn't get touched until you're done, right? So you're going to adjust it using the nut right here. That's a 12. Now, this boot is going to try to rotate, no big deal. It's got a zip tie. Slide it back. It's got a shaft back here that will let that thing spin, okay? But you may have to help it just a touch by holding that tie and keeping that boot from spinning and getting all crinkled up and tearing. Now, what I found, you can't really get a big throw between the upper and the lower A-arm up here. And so what you'll do typically is, on average, you probably have about 4, 6, 8 turns. So what I found, typically, you'll take this righty-tighty, the direction of the threads, you just break it loose left, right? Righty-tighty, you thread it in, kind of a deal, like go from top to bottom, flip the wrench, top to bottom, flip the wrench, top to bottom. Do that again 4, 6, 8 times, and then check your measurements, and that's probably gonna be really close, right? And then you'll just fine tune it from there. Make sure your steering wheel's centered, keep rechecking, because you don't want your steering wheel sitting off. And for a little quicker response, what I find is that if you take the front edge of the tires, and you read up online, there's a bunch of articles of different ways to do this, but if you take the tires and they go kind of slightly towards each other at the front, it ends up being like a quicker steering, right? And then so it's like more responsive, more quick. But if you set the alignment where it's kind of like the same measurement on the front here as it is on the back here, then when you do that, it's kind of a more neutral feel. So it'll feel like maybe an older car where it's like not quite as fast as an input, more like a new car, where if you towed it in, where the two tires would basically effectively kind of point towards each other just ever so slightly, that's going to be a little quicker. So you got some option there, right? You can play with that. Just to change these, no big deal. So you'll basically just take the nut off and the washer off. You'll go up here to the top. You'll take the nut and the washer off up there, right? Now leave the bolts. That's going to help keep everything stable and secure. Obviously, this is tied down on a trailer. Right here is where you'd put your jack, right up on that frame, okay? Be cautious. This thing can slide off the jack, guys. Be careful, okay? And when you start to lift the body, the suspension will droop. Sometimes these tabs are a little tight. You might have to go in there with a pry bar and go this way and push backwards, and so you hit like the back, the front right and then the back left, and then flip your pry bar and pull towards you, and then you'll hit the back right and the front left, and then effectively that'll open that tab back up. What happens is they get squeezed because some of these carts are put together and somebody just leans on the gun and goes brrr, and the next thing you know, this thing is squeezed so tight the shock doesn't even want to come out. So sometimes I'll have to take the nut and the washer, I'll have to drive that out with a drift and a hammer and just knock that bolt out. Now once you get one, it usually frees it all up. Get them both, okay? So you lift the cart, you push the bolt out, take that shock out, put the new one in, start the bolt at the bottom, set the cart back down, right? Load that suspension, tighten it up, and you're all good. And just do that again on the other side. Set your line right here, set your alignment, make sure when you get all done here and all your numbers match, support this one with an 18, make sure it's parallel, and then tighten your lock nut against it with another 18, right, till the bottom's out. Hold that one and then tighten this one, and that's going to keep everything in check. It's all locked back together. And what'll happen is you won't see that big angle like it's got right now. That's the intention. That goes away. Now, some people don't like the steering. The cart has the ability to turn a little sharper than typically what they come out of the box. I found that on almost every single cart. So this is what's stopping you from turning. So another little trick. Lock nut, break it loose. Adjust it with the bolt. The bolt is the stopper. Make sure the bolt catches before the rack runs out. That's going to protect the rack. Okay, so there's a small adjustment you can be doing right here that's going to give you a little bit more steering to the left and the right. I found sometimes up to like 15-20 degrees easily, left and right, and sometimes it's going to give you more on one side than the other because they're not exactly identical when they're set. They're just kind of put in there, seems like. Another little trick I want to point out to you guys, we've talked about some of those things. So sometimes these things steer hard. This kit is going to help free that up a lot. Now I'm going in, I'm going to look below the body, above the bumper. I'm going to point it back in here. When you turn the steering wheel, what happens right there, see that? I'm trying to get you an idea of what you're looking for. Look, follow that arm right across. See that connection? Check those bolts. Right here, you got 8 of those, 2 tops on the right, 2 bottoms on the right. Sweep across, 2 tops on the left, 2 bottoms on the left. Okay, what I was going after is right here. This is that dust cap, okay? See that? Lift that up. It's not attached, it's just sitting down there, right? The weight of itself holds itself, it just slips right over, it keeps that dust out. Inside here, there's a seal, okay? Now, these things are kind of dry, so I use like a little bit of a heavier lube, a multi-purpose lube, and I just put a little squirt, right? I jack the cart up, and I'm gonna be in here working anyway, so I jack the cart up, and I just take that wheel and I turn it to the left, and I turn it to the right, and I do it from up here in front, and I spin this guy back and forth, and then every so often, through that sweep, I just give it another little 1 second squirt or so, rotate back and forth, left and right, and all of a sudden, after 2 or 3 times, you're gonna feel that steering just free right up, and then it'll be even easier than what it's going to be with just putting in the suspension. So I do that when I install them, and a lot of folks absolutely love the way it feels. So I would tell you that if you're not really excited about the steering once you change the kit, it's probably because of this little thing right here. This is your basically like a rack and pinion. It's a worm gear. There's not like a power steering where it's shooting fluid through. It doesn't have a lot of things going on, just a real basic worm gear, right? So just a little lube and it kind of seeps through and gets everything happy. And then in my mind, the theory is that, you know, by putting that on there, now you have a nice little lube ring, right? And that kind of creates kind of a seal. So now your dust, you know, those really fine particles doesn't just flip up and creep in and get into places either. So I don't see that as being harmful. Another little trick, metric, it makes it a little easier when you read the tape. Let me get it up here where you can kind of see a little closer. So typically 4 to 8 turns about on each side, okay? So let's go here, beginning of the tape, 1, right? So what I find is right there, I'll use the metric side. See, that's a little bolder, a little bit more easier to read from a distance anyway. And so I'll go as far as going to a half, right? So like if I was going to right up in here, let's say I might read this as 3.05 if perhaps my string center was sitting somewhere. Oh golly, sorry guys. I'm trying to do this one-handed and film for you to try to give you some assistance. I'm sorry. We're looking to get some help here for this stuff, and we're getting there. We're just not quite there yet. So like perhaps like right there, I might read that as 3.05, right? So the back side of that tire, 3.1 might be right there. So that's where I like to set them. So that just give you maybe a baseline to start, right? So that's about the angle that you would want. You want that minor difference from one side to the other, and that's what gives you that tiny little bit of toe in. So that means this tire is ever so slightly aimed at that tire. That tire is ever so slightly aimed back at this tire. But it's a very minimal amount, and that's what gives you that little bit tighter steering feel, right? So I go about as far as a half on those metrics, and that would kind of give you a really close reading. But just make sure that you double check your wheel, make sure your wheel is straight, make sure this is right, make sure this is right. And then when you go back through and you tighten these things, you're going to want to check it one last time, because sometimes when you go to tighten this, it'll pull the threads, this thing will lock against that, next thing you know, it shifts it over just a tad more. So just check it as you go. If you're doing this yourself, I'm telling you, it probably sounds a bit scary, but it's not so bad. Any of this stuff can be done by your normal service technicians that would be doing repairs on golf carts anyway. Not a great big deal, but I'll tell you, a lot of people have the ability to do things like this themselves. They just choose not to, and that's fine. But if we can be of help, that's kind of the goal here, right? We want to try to give you as much as we can, keep the cost down where you can do some upgrading and have this, you know, lower cost cart that has amazing capabilities just be so much better. Makes it a much more enjoyable experience for most people. Now, I've also tried to give you some tips and tricks on something else. I want to point out something. This is a cart that we're going to be doing today. We're doing this one here differently because there's some other things that's happening on this one. But I want to point out that's your brake switch. Do you see how that brake switch is actually bent? So that's supposed to be straight. And see how it's not? It's bent backwards. See how that wire's up there? That is what activates the switch. Let me back out just a hair so you can kind of see this. All right, so this locks your brake. That's what runs this rod. That's adjustable. So if your brake's not locking properly, there's your adjustment for that. Pull the pin out of the top, the cotter key, pull the pin, break loose the lock nut, and make like a half a turn. Okay, so ideally, right now you see it's locked, it's pushed way down in there. Now to unlock, most people press the accelerator. When you press the accelerator, it rotates through here and forces the brake to unlock via that little bolt right there. Okay, when that happens, that brake pedal goes bong and snaps back. When it does that, it pushes this switch backwards if it was too close to the tab here. Okay, so what you're gonna do, okay, so it is working properly, but hear that? My God, is that dry. This is all fixable, guys. You don't have to go pay a service tech to do this stuff. Look, you go right to wherever, your local department store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, whatever. Go get you some multi-purpose lube and just start hitting these pivot points here, here, come up behind the pedal, right there, right? Right there. That's that adjustment for the lock. So when you release, see how this sits up here just touching the body? Right? If it's not catching, just make a small move. Right? That's all that's doing. When you push that, it's all dry there. We're gonna lube that up. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna tuck this back in there properly so the wire doesn't get chafed and short out. We're gonna take this, we're gonna bend it back properly. We're gonna break loose the lock nuts. And what'll effectively happen is we're probably gonna rotate this and drive it backwards. So we're gonna loosen the front. We're gonna rotate it up about probably 4, 5, 6 threads. Right, and then we're gonna grab this tab, we're gonna put it back into its place, we're gonna take the back nut, and we're gonna drive it forward. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're effectively moving this switch backwards. So that way when this brake releases, it's not hitting here. The only thing that's supposed to be moving during this process as far as the brake lights are concerned is this tiny little tip. That's what activates the brake lights. So if you're a victim of your brake lights staying on, now you know where to look. Check that out. Okay, or if they don't work at all for some reason, take a look at your wiring. There might be a problem there. I just pulled that one right out of that little piece there. You could see, you know, possibly that could be a problem. Now, while we're on the subject, see that little elbow right there, 2 nuts back to back? That's another hinge point. If you go underneath of the cart, straight down, see the pedal here? I'm gonna go down, and I'm gonna go right there. That is your adjuster. There's 2 nuts. It's a double lock method. You're gonna break loose the back nut, okay, right there. Let me try to get this. So let's say you're gonna tighten the brake pedal. It's a little loose. You're gonna take this one with a 13 wrench. You're gonna take this one with a 13 wrench. You're gonna hold this one still. You're gonna back this one out. Remember, righty tighty, lefty loosey, go left, and you're gonna go down from the driver's side, down, down. And you're gonna do that 3-4 times until it's broken free from the front one while you're supporting the front one. And then once that's done, you now have freed the first nut. The first nut is the nut that drives the cable. So as you press the brake, it pulls, okay? It's pulling from that rod. See that? And so what happens is you're tightening the distance. So you're taking away the slack. Ideally, what I found is if it's lubricated properly, these pedals, you would have about an inch of movement up top. Okay, so as far as the actual adjustment, this one's actually really close. So we're gonna lube it up. We're gonna fix that brake switch. We're gonna make all those little creaks go away because there's no need for all that. We're gonna go down inside this accelerator pedal. There's a little bearing on the left, a little bearing on the right. We're gonna get a little fluid down in there. We're gonna clean it all back up, wipe it up. And that fluid's gonna help keep this thing quiet, running freely, properly. When you're all done, this little guy right here, he just comes right off. You just slide it down, work it back and forth. It's rubber. When you're turning wrenches, guys, sometimes you gotta be a bit aggressive because some of these things are made to fit tight, right? They don't want them to fall off or just come out. So that's the idea there, okay? It slides right in. It's got like a double top and bottom, and then it's got little catches. So you just kind of fish it in, and those little tabs, like right here, right there, you're gonna fish those in, and then that body plastic piece right here is gonna slip in between those. All right. Hopefully we got everything covered, guys. If you have any questions, please shoot back something on the Facebook or reach out. Let us try to help you. Whatever we can do to help, we'll do our best. Thanks again, guys. Art, Pops Customs, aka Pops. Talk to you. Bye.